Hello, everybody. It's Philip Lee returning with another episode of Civil War Chat. Today is Thursday, the 26th of August, 2021. To subscribe to my channel, click on the subscribe button below and also the notification bell in the upper right. Today's topic is anti-racism and Southern culture. If the critical race theory and anti-racism schools of thought gain more traction, I think we can say goodbye to a lot of Confederate memory and a lot of the culture of the South that we enjoy and respect from the traditions that we've had down here. But a lot of that's going to be gone because these things demonize Southerners. So what I'm going to do is I've read Ibram Kindy's book, How to Be an Anti-Racist, and I'm going to discuss that so that those of you who don't know him and what he's up to, that you'll learn that. And then I'm going to integrate in there, a little bit about his life and how he came to these conclusions. So let me pull up my notes on that and we'll go ahead and proceed. Southern heritage will be erased and replaced by a race-centric narrative that demonizes white Southerners if critical race theory, CRT, and its conjoined twin of anti-racism continue to gain traction. CRT concludes that underperformance of Blacks results from systemic racism. Anti-racism is a doctrine compelling government and employers and other institutions to adopt so-called equity policies that ensure equal average results between two racial groups, such as Blacks and whites. It replaces America's founding principle of an individual's equality under the law with a group collective of equality of outcomes. If Blacks have shorter lifespans, lower educational achievements, and smaller incomes, anti-racism requires the government to intervene, even if the average lifespans and educational status and income levels of whites are reduced to those of Blacks, evidently. Boston University's professor, Ibram X Kindy, that's spelled K-E-N-D-I, is the leading anti-racism spokesman in America, I would say probably throughout the world. At age 34, 5 years ago, he was the youngest author to win a National Book Award for Stamped from the Beginning, the definitive history of racist ideas in America. His latest book, How to Be an Antiracist, autobiographically reveals how he gradually transitioned from basically hating whites as an anti-white racist to race neutral to eventually anti-racist. Eventually, he concluded that, quote, the language of not racist is a mask to hide racism, close quote. There is, he writes, no such thing as a race neutral policy. Every policy is either producing racial inequity or racial equity. By equity, he means equality of outcomes as opposed to equality of opportunity. Thus, he argues, quote, the only remedy to racist discrimination is anti-racist discrimination. And the only remedy to past discrimination is present reverse discrimination. The only remedy to present discrimination is future reverse discrimination, close quote. Thus, not only must MIT guarantee that Blacks compose a proportional share of engineering freshmen based upon race, it must evidently also ensure that they represent the same proportional share at graduation, regardless of academic performance. In Kindy's analysis, failure to sustain proportionality between incoming freshmen and graduates would merely indicate that MIT is racist. Not that it has graduated students with widely varying competency in the engineering discipline, because some of them have been have been subjected to policies that increase their grades without merit. Notwithstanding his concern for poor Blacks, Kindy is himself a product of privilege. First, until high school, he attended private schools. Second, he was not raised in a fatherless home like many Blacks and a growing number of whites. Nearly 40 years after his birth, his parents remained married. Both were attentive to his child rearing. When he failed to make the junior varsity basketball team in high school, he fell weeping into the arms of a father who well understood the boy's desire for athletic success, particularly in basketball. Both parents were successful in white-collar jobs and careers that must have yielded superior family income. They also believed that effort and attitude were the chief sources of success. They applied themselves to take advantage of America's increasing equality of opportunity during their lives between the races. Equality of opportunity between the races increased during their lives, and they took advantage of it. Although Kindy attended a predominantly Black public high school after previously going to private schools, he was in the International Baccalaureate Group, a program for intellectually superior students. But he sat at the back row, and in his book, he complains that the teacher gave most of her attention to the 3 white students who sat in the front row. He perceived them as privileged teachers' pets and gave no thought, apparently, to the racial challenges they faced in a predominantly Black school. Perhaps, for example, they sat in the front row because they were eager to learn. When the school announced a competition for student speeches honoring Dr. Martin Luther King, another student convinced Kindy to enter the competition. On the morning of his speech, Kindy overslept. No excuse for being late beyond oversleeping. He did not arrive until the competition was over, but the student that had motivated him to write the speech begged the teacher to let him make it. She gave in, and although Kindy won the contest, he fails to consider whether one of those 3 white students would have been permitted to present their speech if they had irresponsibly overslept and missed the class. I doubt it. Kindy's second chance may have been a good example of Black racial privilege, which he is blind to. During his senior year as an undergraduate, he forked over $1,000 for a preparatory course to boost his graduate record exam test results by an average of 200 points. Now, the graduate record exam, the GRE, is required to get into graduate school. He eventually did at Temple University in Philadelphia, and he eventually got a PhD there. But to get in there, he had to take the GRE, and he did spend $1,000 to take this preparatory class, which, as I say, was advertised to raise his score by 200 points. And the ranges in the GRE are comparable to those of the SAT. So 200 points is a huge amount. Nonetheless, he concluded the course was racist because most of the students were white. Well, I don't know how many of my graduate school classmates took a preparatory course. I do recall that we had a larger than expected number of Blacks enrolled in that particular class because of affirmative action scholarships. Although Kindy's narrative of America's historical racism towards Black is well footnoted, he is unfairly sometimes selective in his citations, leaving an impression of fudging evidence to support his predetermined conclusion or a predetermined conclusion. One example is a paragraph citing historical white violence towards Blacks in which he states, quote, Seceding Texas legislators in 1861, when they joined the Confederacy, complained of not receiving more federal appropriations from the United States government against ruthless savages, close quote. Kindy fails to explain that that statement applied to Indians, not blacks. When at war, Comanches killed both blacks and whites. And the Comanches were not subdued until 1875, which was 14 years after that statement was made. In a second example involving the 2012 Trayvon Martin shooting by George Zimmerman near Orlando, Kindy misrepresents Zimmerman as a racist and exaggerates his criminal record. Zimmerman was a registered Democrat and had voted for Barack Obama. Despite media pressure and deceptive editing of 911 tapes, FBI investigators were brought in above the state level, above the municipal level, and they concluded that there was no evidence that Zimmerman was racist. 8 years earlier, Zimmerman had even started an insurance agency with a black partner. 1 year before the shooting of Trayvon Martin, Zimmerman attended a municipal hearing where he publicly criticized, and it's recorded on tape at the meeting, he publicly criticized the police for abusing blacks, particularly an attack he witnessed on a homeless man. When he was 22, Zimmerman was arrested for shoving an undercover policeman dressed in civilian clothes who was trying to overpower a Zimmerman friend at the bar that he wanted to arrest. That was Zimmerman's only prior conviction to the Trayvon Martin incident. In terms of a world view, Kindy's parents were, quote, all about self-reliance, close quote, which results in a meritocracy. Their son argues, however, that any performance gap between two racial groups is conclusive evidence of racism. Since all races are biologically equal, he argues, systemic racism can be the only explanation for a performance gap, which must be corrected by anti-racist policies. Differences in racial group behavior cannot be the explanation, according to Kindy, because it, quote, is a figment of the racist person's imagination, close quote. Behavior, differences in behavior is a figment of a racist person's imagination. Think about it. When he attended college at historically black Florida A&M University, he was enraged that when George W. Bush won the presidency over Al Gore, he was convinced Gore would have won except for Florida's supposed voter suppression rules. Although Bush won the state by only 247 votes, Kindy later learned that thousands of Florida A&M students who were registered voters chose not to vote. He prefers to blame so-called systemic racism for Gore's loss, even though his A&M classmates could have put Gore in the White House if they had been self-reliant enough to simply cast their votes. Finally, Kindy may wish to examine the life expectancy between whites and blacks, or the life expectancy gap between blacks and whites. At birth, white males have a 76-year life expectancy compared to 72 years for black males. Kindy's autobiography may provide one explanation for that gap. During the last 4 months of 2017, he was focused on combating the, quote, white nationalists who were running and terrorizing the United States, close quote. He ignored weight loss and bloody diarrhea. By Thanksgiving, he was bedridden and throwing up. By Christmas, things had become acute. A January 10th, 2018 colonoscopy revealed stage 4 colon cancer. It had advanced so far that the statistical recovery probability was only 12%. Even though he became one of the fortunate few to get in that 12%, his survival probabilities could have been improved probably significantly if he had been self-reliant enough to consult a doctor earlier in the face of such obvious symptoms. Okay, so I want to share something with you now. Share screen. There it is. Here we go. This is my book, Causes of the Civil War. I think will give you a good idea of what really caused the Civil War. What I focus on in here, in addition to why the South seceded and why the South chose to fight, I focus on one thing that the academic professors basically ignore. They may know some of it, but they ignore it. And what I focus on is, why did the North choose to fight? If they didn't want slavery, why didn't they just let the first 7 cotton states secede, just go away in peace? A number of Northern leaders, such as Horace Greeley, the future President Rutherford B. Hayes, and even Lincoln's own Secretary of State, who would become Secretary of State under Lincoln, Edwin Stanton, were either okay with them doing that or were ready to acquiesce to it. And there would have been no war if they had let the 7 cotton states secede. The other four Confederate states that joined the Confederacy when the North decided to invade the cotton states to coerce them back in the Union, they would probably have remained in the Union. Can't say for sure, but they had already decided to remain in the Union with the 7 cotton states out of it. It was only the call to coerce them back into the Union that led to the secession of the 4 Upper South states. Those states had half of the Confederacy's white population, and from which it drew its men to the army. So this is available. The book is available at Barnes and Noble and Amazon for $22. But if you want to get a autograph copy, you can get an autograph copy directly from me. Just email me, Phil, PHIL _ Leigh, LEIGH @me.com. If you're here in the United States, it'll cost you $25, and I will cover the postage, and it will be an autographed copy of Causes of the Civil War by Philip Leigh. Okay, that's our show for today, and thanks for watching.